From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Shivani Joshi, and this is your news, sports, and weather update at noon on 1680 The Crow. Robbie El Khalil has the top spot on the Be on the Lookout list of the 25 most wanted fugitives in Canada. He is wanted for murder and for being unlawfully at large when he escaped from Coquitlam's North Fraser Pre-Trial Centre this summer. A reward of up to $250,000 is being offered for information that leads to his arrest. The Bolo description of the fugitive says he is a very dangerous criminal with a lengthy criminal record and extensive ties to organized crime. The last Bolo list released in April led to the arrest of many wanted suspects. Any tips about the wanted parties can be left by calling local police detachments or Crime Stoppers. According to Gas Wizard, drivers are hoping to get some relief at the pumps on Wednesday. The prices are predicted to drop 7 cents to 185.9. Analysts explain the prices were high due to tight supplies as a major West Coast pipeline and refinery underwent maintenance. October is Cyber Awareness Month, and BC is educating students on how to protect themselves from ransomware. Our reporter Chattis Leo has a story.
According to American statistics, a business suffers from a ransomware attack every 7 seconds. It's stats like this that are making cyber attacks on businesses and people an ongoing threat to private information. Ilya Levotsky, a digital forensics instructor at BCIT, who's hosting a ransomware awareness workshop, says that we should all be concerned.
We should definitely be worried, and the topic of ransomware has been around 3, 4, 5 years. We should all be worried about it. I mean, obviously the higher threat and the higher danger is to companies and government organizations, but I see a lot of private people being infected by ransomware.
If you're wanting to learn how to protect you and your information, you can sign up for the online workshop on the BCIT website events page. Chattis Leo, 1680 The Crow.
We now go live to our reporter Chattis Leo with more on the story. Chattis, what are some consequences that people can face if they do not properly protect their data?
Yes, thanks, Shivani. Worst case scenario for people and businesses is losing all of your important and personal files. People known to be paying thousands of dollars to criminals in order to retrieve their information.
And what can people do to protect themselves from these digital attacks?
Absolutely, Shivani. The best practice is to be aware. Understanding antivirus software, using caution when opening email attachments, and choosing highly difficult passwords are some good ways to stay protected.
Thank you, Chattis. The BC Government Employees Union, representing public service workers in BC, has ratified a new collective agreement with the government. The agreement includes a wage protection against inflation. They say 53.4% of eligible members who cast ballots voted to ratify the deal, following 2 weeks of strikes and 8 months of negotiating. The BC government says the 3-year deal covers about 30,000 people, including sheriffs, correctional officers, and unionized members of the liquor distribution branch. The deal also includes wage increases and cost of living adjustments and supports employee health and safety and mental health in the workplace. The Sunshine Coast has declared a local state of emergency due to the ongoing droughts. However, Remco Rosenboom says despite the declaration, no one should panic.
We're not in a panic situation yet. This state of emergency has been declared to allow us to restrict the users, and it's all with the intent to make sure that we're not getting into a stage where we have to panic. And this is just another further step to also reduce the demand by the community.
The region is banning all non-essential commercial uses of water and is one of many BC communities dealing with level 5 drought conditions, which is considered the highest risk rating. Doug McCallum's party Safe Surrey Coalition released a statement saying that he is not ready to concede this weekend's mayoral race. The party says that legal advisors are reviewing the rules for requesting a judicial recount through BC Supreme Court. According to the unofficial polls, Mayor-elect Brenda Locke defeated McCallum by less than 1,000 votes. In Port Moody, an election recount has also been initiated after a difference of only 2 votes between 2 candidates who are running for councillor. Philip Lowe, Port Moody's chief election officer, said it is the right thing to do for the sake of transparency, fairness, and democracy, even though it is not legally required. It is day 4 of the inquiry on the federal government's use of the Emergency Act. Ottawa's departing Mayor Jim Watson testified at the inquiry, telling the commission that he needed help from higher levels of government because Ottawa needed a stronger police presence.
The residents living on those streets having these horns honk literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, plus the diesel fumes, plus roasting a pig on one street, bonfires, lighting off fireworks, having a dance party. It was showing complete disrespect for the people who lived in the city of Ottawa. And I put that wording in very strongly to let the 2 other orders of government know that we needed their help. Our city's back was against the wall.
High-ranking officers from the Ottawa Police Service and Ontario Provincial Police are slated to speak at the public inquiry this week. 2 COVID reports were published on Monday about the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on Canadians and the healthcare system. Stats Canada published one of the reports. It stated that nearly 15% of people infected by COVID say they experience persisting symptoms such as fatigue, shortness of breath, and brain fog for at least 3 months or more. However, compared to the Omicron variant infections, fewer Canadians reported long-term symptoms. A separate report by the Canadian Medical Association Journal said that Ontarians who tested positive used more healthcare resources in months after their infection than those who are negative. Researchers say reports on long COVID can help the system better prepare for COVID-related healthcare demands. French cement company Lafarge has pleaded guilty to supporting terrorist groups to keep a factory running in Syria. The Associated Press reporter Julie Walker has more.
U.S. Attorney Breon Peace calls it a first-of-its-kind case.
Lafarge made a deal with the devil.
That was back in 2013 and 14. Now they pay fines of $91 million plus forfeiting $687 million, according to the agreement. Deputy U.S. Attorney General Lisa Monaco says while many Western countries left Syria because of terrorists, Lafarge made a different decision.
To go into business with ISIS and al-Nusra, 2 of the world's most notorious and brutal terrorist organizations.
Lafarge ended up merging with another company which fired those executives, but emails and other evidence uncovered the payments. I'm Julie Walker.
In sports news, the Vancouver Canucks are looking for a win as they take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Both teams are yet to win a game this season, and head coach Bruce Boudreau says it will come down to who will be able to finish out a game first. Puck drop is scheduled for 4 p.m. from Columbus. In other hockey news, the Edmonton Oilers will be up against the Buffalo Sabres this evening. Both teams currently sit at 1-1. Puck drop is at 6 p.m. in Edmonton. In soccer news, the Whitecaps have announced that wingback Luis Martins has been re-signed to a new contract through 2024 with a club option in 2025. Last season, he had 3 assists in 13 appearances. Whitecaps sporting director Axel Schuster says Luis has a strong understanding of their system and will benefit from having a preseason at the club. Now on to NBA. Our reporter Kyle Collis has more on the opening games tonight.
Championship ring night for the Golden State Warriors as NBA opening day is upon us. The Warriors will be giving out championship rings and raising their team's 7th title banner. They'll be taking on the Los Angeles Lakers as they begin their title defense in the 2022 NBA season. Despite being listed as day-to-day, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook are now all listed as probable and expected to play tonight. Tip-off is set for 7 p.m. Kyle Collis, 1680, The Crow.
The Boston Celtics also take on the Philadelphia 76ers today, 4:30 p.m. In baseball, there are 2 MLB playoff games expected today. The New York Yankees are facing off against the Cleveland Guardians. The game was scheduled for yesterday night but was rained out. The Philadelphia Phillies will be taking on the San Diego Padres in Game 1 of the National League Championship Series. First pitch is scheduled for 5:03 p.m. It is currently a sunny 15 degrees this afternoon in Burnaby with expected highs to 21 degrees. Wednesday and Thursday are both showing partly cloudy, with Wednesday showing a high of 21 degrees and Thursday showing a high of 16. After a long October with no rain, the forecast is finally showing some showers for the weekend. I'm Shivani Joshi with your news, sports, and weather update at noon.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Companion Call here on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Victor Gaucher, and I'm joined today by Keisha Cleaver and Rohan Karnik. Today we'll be discussing the barriers women, LGBTQ2+, and BIPOC people have faced as they enter the brewing industry, as well as what steps are being taken in order to make the brewing industry a more welcoming environment. Keisha is a host of the East Van Beer Wife podcast, and she currently writes policy and codes of conducts for breweries, and her focus is on celebrating women in beer and inclusivity for all. Rohan Karnik is co-founder and beer broker, or director of sales, for Shaketown Brewing in North Vancouver. Rohan and his good friend Ryan Schultz started Shaketown with hope of becoming a great spot within his local community. Keisha, Rohan, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
How are we doing?
Doing great. This is great.
Yeah. Good. Glad you could be here. So briefly, Keisha, we'll start with you. Where did your passion for beer come from?
It's funny because I am almost 13 years sober and I didn't drink beer at all. And then I met my now husband, Travis, 7 years ago, and he was making moonshine in his kitchen when I met him and was just getting into brewing. And he was just a guy with a pot in our kitchen and started brewing, and he loved it so much. And he was doing graphic design for almost 20 years at that point and was just tired of sitting at a desk all day, and he's like, I want to roll the dice on this. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So quit his graphic design job and started brewing, and he got a job at a brewery, Monkey 9 in Richmond, and they didn't really have anybody managing the brew house at the time. And he's like, I don't know how to do bookkeeping, I don't know how to do any of the stuff the government needs us to do. So I was like, well, let me figure it out. And then I just started managing the brew house and doing all the day-to-day ordering and excise and all that stuff you need to make it so the government doesn't shut you down. And so I started attending more and more beer events because of that, and noticing a real gap in women in the industry. And COVID hit and everyone lost jobs, and Monkey 9 actually ended up closing during COVID instead of staying open and going to a delivery model. So I was just sitting like on my deck one night with Travis joking around that I should start a podcast about all the brewers' wives and like complaining about like having grain in your car and like you having to go pick up your husband because he's too drunk. And then someone was like, and then I started like sending out messages to like all the brewers' wives, be like, hey, let's do this, like East Van Beer Wives. And then it became more women reaching out to me, being like, something's wrong, like I can't get any jobs, or I can't reach like the grain mill, or this doesn't feel like a safe space for me. So then I just started interviewing women in the industry who were noticing gaps within the industry for women and for people of color and for the LGBTQ2S+ community. So it turned into more of uniting women to support them, and calling out breweries that weren't safe spaces so people knew where they could go. And I did that for about a year, and then it was a lot. So I took a step back from the podcast, and now I help breweries become like safer spaces. And I've been working with one brewery that's going to be opening in Kelowna in the spring, because they're on West Bank First Nation. So they want to really bring in a lot of Indigenous culture into the brewery. So I'm doing consulting with that and helping write codes of conduct. And so I'm still in the beer industry, just in a way different way, and just trying to shake it up and having a real good time doing it.
That's awesome. And Rohan, when did you start to like beer?
Oh, I might get my dad in trouble for this, but maybe 12 years old, he gave me a sip of his beer, and I thought it was disgusting. And then, I mean, I've always drank beer. Never thought I'd own a brewery, to be honest with you. Like you said, my business partner, Ryan Schultz, approached me. He's always wanted to open a distillery or a brewery. And when North Van rezoned for breweries in 2019, the light bulb kind of went in his head. He approached me because we've known each other for about 25 years. Always wanted to do something together. And honestly, the first reaction when he said, do you want to open a brewery with me? I was like, I don't know anything about selling beer. I can drink beer, but I can't. So he's like, you've always been in sales. I'm sure you can sell beer. And that's how I kind of fell into it. It was, I've always drank it, but I'd say the last, because we've only been open for 6.5 months, but it's been a 2-year project. My mind has just expanded about how great beer can be.
That's awesome. Because you're so new into the industry, have you experienced any hardships yourself trying to break in?
Honestly, for me, my personal experience is, so I used to be a hospital fundraiser for about 6 years. I got into that because I was in sales and I hated the cutthroat of the industry I was currently in. And I thought nonprofit would be the most lovey-dovey industry. Sadly, not sadly, but weirdly so, it's probably more cutthroat. It's the most cutthroat industry I've ever been in. Mainly because there are private foundations, family foundations popping up every day. But the pie of money you're going after in any city is the same size. So I did that for about 5-6 years, and then got into the beer industry. And the beer industry is probably the most welcoming industry I've ever been in. From the get-go, other breweries around us, like House of Funk and North Point, the owners are there, really took us under their wing. When we were putting just even our budget together, Darren from House of Funk literally opened up his laptop at a lunch and said, "What do you guys want to see?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "My projections before we open, my 3 months after, my 6 months after." And I think he saw my jaw was on the ground. And he was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "We're technically competitors. Why are you helping us?" And he's like, "Because that's what we do in this industry. We help each other out. If someone needs something, we help them out." He was like, "There was someone there when I was starting out that helped me out. So I basically asked them, how can I help you back?" And he said, "Just pay it forward." So that's a big part of us, is anyone that's new to the industry, we're always happy to help. And that's what I love about the industry.
That's awesome. I was always kind of wondering that, because there seems to be a new brewery popping up every other day or so, and only so much beer can be drank, I'm sure. So I always wondered how.
Yeah, but there's no competition about it. There's always room for more. I know, like, the East Van market is pretty, like, oversaturated, but I don't think anyone's doing terribly. I know COVID hit very hard, and I think we're just still climbing out of that. And but I know, like, for Trav, if he calls someone, I know he calls David at Powell all the time and is like, "I need this," or "I need yeast," and David's always great. And I know Travis's grain barrels just got stolen last week, all 8 of them. So he just started calling breweries to be like, "I'm brewing and need grain barrels." And it's really just like you help each other out a lot, and just like lift each other up, because the beer is for everyone, and it's no one's fighting over supplies or anything.
Or customers even.
Or customers, I know.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the brewing industry, from brewery to brewery, is welcoming to the owners and the staff for the most part. What kind of steps do you think have been taken or need to be taken in order to make it a safer space for all customers and all people as well?
Yeah, I think it's so funny, because the brewing industry is so welcoming and so inclusive, and everybody's like, I personally never feel unsafe walking into a space. But then I hear from customers who don't know the people in the industry, they don't have that same feeling. And I think it's just because the brewing industry has become a very, like, white male cis dominated industry. So that's the kind of people you will attract if that's who everyone is, like, the poster of your establishment is. And same thing, like, with beer festivals, everyone looks the same. Everybody's named Dave.
Our brewmaster's name's Dave.
Travis knows like 8 Daves, and he has to always be like, "Oh no, it's this Dave or Hop Dave," and it's So I think if that's who your poster people are for your business, that's who you're going to attract. So I know that can be really hard for people of color or for women going into a space when they don't see anybody who looks like them. I know I've talked about this a lot, like, on my podcast, like, going to beer festivals, especially, like, to BC Beer Awards, which is my favorite event of the year. I'm so excited. We're, like, less than a month away. But being in a circle of people, especially when I was working for a brewery and we were up for awards, and, like, I had just the right amount, or what am I looking for? I had the right to be there like everybody else who was in the room, but all of the white men in the circle were talking over me and above me, and again, like, no one can see me, but I'm very little. So it was easy for all of these men in the circle to be able to overlook me, and I'm like, I had as much to do with this process as everybody here. And, like, this win is as much, like, Travis's win as it is mine, because we did this whole thing together. Like, yes, he brewed the beer, but he would be brewing the beer for no one if someone wasn't running the show. So it's really, like, people who are in the industry really have to lift up women and people of color and queer people because if the white bearded men of the beer world aren't lifting up other people, then there's no one there to lift them up. We can't lift up ourselves. So
Right.
yeah.
Why is it important to kind of steer away from the typical beer is a man's drink and only bearded guys named Dave can drink it? Why is it important to kind of create a space for everyone?
I mean, I think that's just a lesson for life in any industry, not just for the beer world. I think the old boys club is hopefully a thing of the past. I think people are being aware that it doesn't matter where you're from, your sexual orientation. If you like beer, you like beer. Doesn't matter what you look like, the only thing that, at least for us too, when we're hiring people, we just care about your qualifications. And honestly, not even qualifications. If you have a good attitude, we can teach you anything. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, anything, any sexual orientation, we don't care. We care about the person. And I think that's where the industry is going. It's taken a long time to get there, but I think we're on the right path, and people are realizing. And I think the biggest thing is people are talking, the ones that were affected, and that's in anything. When you're the victim, you always feel like it's your fault if you say something. I think the beer industry is starting to let people know if something's affecting you, if something's happened to you, you should be vocal about it, and you will find there's a lot of people, more people than they probably think, that will be by your side supporting you.
Yeah. And also, by not making your space safe for people other than like white bearded men, if you think about it from a sales perspective, you're losing a huge target audience that you could make money from. So I know it's not all about capitalism, but if you're running a business, the more people who want to come and support your business,
the better.
The better it's going to be for your business. Yeah. So that's only marketing 101.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to that, even going into putting the brewery together, we knew people who drank beer would drink our beer. Mainly because our brewmaster, Dave, he has a small beard, not a big beard. He's been doing this for 25, 30 years. He's very well known in the industry. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
People that drink your beer will drink your beer. So we knew people would drink his beer. But we were like, how do we tap the people that don't drink our beer?
Yeah.
And I asked a lot of my friends, guys and girls who don't drink beer, I'm like, why don't you drink beer? And they're like, oh, because every beer tastes hoppy. And they think every beer is an 8% IPA.
And hazy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we're trying to change that narrative that beers are not all taste the same. We're really, every time because we have cider that we get from a cidery in Gibson's, we have wine for people who don't drink. But whenever people come up and order one of those, we get our staff to ask them, why don't you like beer? A lot of the time people are like gluten, and we get that. But some people are like, I just don't like the taste. And then that's when we tell our staff, just give them a little taster of this one or this one, this one. And the look on their faces when they're like, oh, this doesn't taste like a tree. Like, this is actually really good. There's a lot of flavor notes. So we're trying to get those people who don't drink beer to drink beer, because there's a really big untapped market. And what Keisha said, at the end of the day, it's how can we make more money for a business.
Oh, for sure. And for me, someone who doesn't drink at all, I taste everything that Travis brews, or if we go into a place and I do my podcast, I'll taste everything. But I'm someone who lives a mostly sober existence. I can't sit and drink a whole pint of something, but I want to go to spaces that has alternatives for me as well. So the fancy pops, I call them, or there's the Ednas now, which are the no alcohol cocktails, which are fantastic. And also, being a woman who's also a mother, I also look, is this a space I can bring my kid to? Because if I can't bring my kid to it, then I'm not going to go to it. So is there a change table? Is there somewhere before? Could I park my stroller? And some spaces, even though we loved them, weren't safe to bring our kid to. So then that also is a whole untapped market of family, especially in East Van. And even where you are in North Van, you've got the families. And if families can't come into your space, that's also you're losing a huge market. So trying to make spaces as safe and inclusive for everyone. And if a stroller can't fit into your space, a wheelchair can't fit into your space. So again, you're losing that whole community.
Right. Rohan, you kind of touched on it earlier by saying that the beer market the beer industry has gone a long way away from the old times to being more inclusive, but obviously they still have a long ways to go. What steps do you think need to be taken immediately in order to get us to that space? Is it just the more breweries? Because the relationship between brewery to brewery seems very strong and very welcoming. So is it just the more breweries, the better?
Possibly. I think at the end of the day, it's education. informing people that just because this person looks a certain way doesn't mean they like these certain things. Like there's a girl out in Ontario, Jen Navarro, who's kind of at the forefront of bringing diversity to the brewery world. And it's just talking to her, and she's like, I thought I was well educated of this topic, and the more I talk to her, the more I realize there's so much more for me to learn. And yeah, I think it's just education and the willing to want to learn and get out of your comfort zone. I think is the biggest part that we can do to really push this past the next level.
Yeah, Ren with
Sorry, Ren Navarro.
Yeah,
Ren
Ren Navarro. You did, but that's okay.
Sorry, Ren Navarro.
Yeah, beer diversity.
Yeah.
She's amazing. When there was a brewery in East Van that got called out like real hard last year, and they hired her to come in, and they fly her in almost every month to do a lot of work with their staff and with their owners to change their space. I think they tried a little hard in the beginning, and it looked a little fake, but they're doing really well now, and they're really making strides and trying to make the spaces safe possible. And I think they came back from the call out. There are some breweries I don't think would come back from a call out as big as that they received, but they did a lot of work. And yeah, flying Ren out, and she's fantastic. Yeah. And yeah, so she's beer diversity on Instagram, and that's her whole job is making beer safe for everyone. And yeah, she's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like we just need to get more breweries in the industry, but also just educate people as a whole. I really want to thank you guys for your time. You guys had some great discussions. I just have one final question for you, Rohan. What is your favorite beer at this moment?
Okay, so everyone asks me that every day.
I asked that on my podcast too, and it was such a hard question. So
and I'll give you the same answer I give everyone. That's like asking me who's my favorite child.
Yes.
Different day, different choice.
Yeah. Beer of the moment is what I ended up going with.
Okay.
Yeah.
But right now, I'd have to say, so if it's our own beer, which I'll say, and then I'll maybe give you another one I really enjoy. Dave just made a couple months ago a grisette, which is like a lower percentage saison. Okay. But he made it with Szechuan peppercorns and blood orange. And at first you don't think that sounds good because you're like, why would you put Szechuan peppercorns in a beer? It is out of this world. Yeah.
Okay.
And then kind of my go-to because there's so many beers sometimes on a beer list or at a beer store, my go-to is always Twin Sails Dat Juice.
Oh, yeah.
Classic. That's a classic, great one. Yeah.
Keisha, I was going to ask you the same question, but because you don't really drink beer, I'm going to frame it a little differently.
Yeah.
What is your favorite brewery at the moment?
Oh, see, that's...
Shakedown.
Shakedown. I am going to say I haven't made it over to your space yet. I know Trav does the North End Brewery Tours with the baby or the toddler whenever I'm busy. My brewery of the moment... I know this isn't a brewery. I really like Steamworks' new space on Main Street. It's amazing. You can have dogs on the patio, and it's fantastic, and I love it.
Awesome.
But my brewery of the moment would have to be R&B. Because their pizzas are really great, and they are okay with my toddler standing on the table and reading books out loud to the entire brewery. And they have a change table in every bathroom, so that's really helpful. Good. And Rick and Barry are just like fantastic, and they've been in the industry for so long. And but yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
shoes on. Like, if I leave them on, I've ruined the streak of the last, 10 years of never wearing shoes before. I do all kinds of tattoos, whatever the customer asks for mostly. But lately I've been doing mostly form line style indigenous tattoos. I'm Métis on my dad's side, but I was raised by my mom. So I didn't grow up with a huge personal connection to my indigenous ancestry. But as I started doing more indigenous tattoos, that kind of got me a little bit more interested in finding more about my own history.
Và sẽ hadit tundo, tademus li, sastros li, nadle witen yinka dene dakels. In my language, that means my name is Randall Bear Barnetson. I come from the Bear clan, the village of Nadle, and of the Dakels First Nation. That's my nation.
On the back tattoo, I think it's been about 12 hours now, I would say. 10 to 12 hours. On my left arm here, I have the bear for Dentemu, my Bear clan. And then I have the Thunderbirds on the middle, and then the double eagles on the bottom. So this is for my Dakels people on my mother's side. And then also the double eagles from my Newhawk family, and then the Thunderbirds from my father's side. His crest was a Thunderbird. So that's why I have the Thunderbird on my back as well, along with the bear. Since time immemorial, we would commission an artist to do a clan design or a crest for us in our community. We'd go to a local artist and ask them to do a design for our clan or community to represent ourselves, our family, our community, and our nation.
Hadit, Ani, Sasan, welcome to my studio.
So my tattoos, they all represent that, from my Bear clan to my Thunderbirds to my Eagle clan. They represent and they place me in my community and show my affiliation there. And so that's why I love working with Logan, because Logan, he helps me to kind of embody these teachings in these clans and crests, and he really contextualizes these teachings that we have. And then on this side, I got the East Van cross, because where I was born, East Van. So I kind of go between two, because traditionally, land and people are the most important things to us as traditional indigenous people. So when I turned 18, I was like, I'm going to get the East Van cross on my arm. I'm going to go to do it. I went to a tattoo artist, and he said, nah, come back in a couple of years when you figure it out a bit more. And I was like, what the hell, man? I want to get tattooed. And he was like, nah, think about it some more, come back. And then I waited a decade, and then Logan did it for me.
My name is Shanton Hopkins. I am a tattoo artist here at East Van Warren Tattoo Company. Born and raised in East Vancouver. I am Indigenous to Darcy Anderson Lake, better known to us as the Naquaqua people. It's part of the Stallion Nation. So growing up, I was a pretty rebellious kid. Just always getting into trouble, getting into fights, drinking, stealing cars when I was 12. Went to jail when I was 14. It's just a lot of pain and trauma from my mother. She was an alcoholic who dealt with her generational trauma from my grandmother, who was in residential school. So just trickled down, passed down to me, right? But me and myself, I've been doing a lot of work on myself. I've been sober now for 3 years. Trying to break the chain and the link for my kids, right? So my style, I do I like to stick with a realism, black and gray, but I like to try to incorporate a native form line art to it. So I do my own West Coast style, form line, native art with the realism. Yeah, it's just sort of a unique touch that I wanted to come up with. For me, I always wanted to sort of incorporate like the native art inside of my tattoo work. And black and gray realism is something that I always wanted to pursue. I want to keep that style of art alive. I want to keep the form line art alive, right? It's been here already for centuries. Even though it's been tweaked a little bit, whatever, like all artists have their own styles of their own art, right? Well, we have all kinds of different backgrounds getting like Oriental Japanese style sleeves. I tattooed this native guy just last week. We did a full native realism piece on his arm, full sleeve. He already had an existing like Oriental Japanese style dragon on his other arm, right? I'm like, yeah, if like you have like enough love and respect for the culture, like I don't see why it would be an issue for anybody to want to get like form-line native art tattooed on their bodies, right? If it's nothing but love and respect, that's all that matters, right?
I think it's really complicated. It's non-Indigenous people, unless there's like, the way I was taught is if there's a story, connection to the story, and you go about it in a good way, as you do work with an Indigenous artist, and you go about the proper protocols, and you know the story and the connection there, then it's more acceptable. However, if you get a clan design or a clan crest, then that has such larger meaning behind it, and affiliation to, like I said, to place, community, to people. And you're essentially saying that you are part of them. And that's a tough thing to claim. And we always say it's not who you claim, but who claims you.
It's a little controversial, and it's everybody has a differing viewpoint. And for me, it's different client to client. Like sometimes, like I have some European tourist that's like, yeah, I want this salmon because I'm in Canada. And in that case, like, you know, go home and think about it a little bit, do a little bit of research. But other times, like I've tattooed white people that have been adopted by a nation and have lived their whole life on reserve and around Indigenous art and Indigenous people, and they want to honor that. And I think that's dope too. Bar down over there is like, was a strip club, and very much like a biker skittish kind of hangout. My dad's stories about Steveston are a lot different than what my feelings about Steveston. I see Indigenous tattooing kind of flourishing even more. Just the artwork in itself is becoming more and more popular. People are more down to collect fine art and that sort of thing. Like I know the Canucks are having warm-up jerseys done by an Indigenous artist. So it's kind of in people's faces so much more, and it's so much more like widely accepted. And yeah, I think the future is bright for Indigenous tattooers, for sure.
How does it feel?
Yeah.
Greatest feeling.
Natalia for showcasing Logan and traditional tattooing and traditional Indigenous art, and having this be a part of the conversation and bringing us to the table in that. So, Snachalia in my language means thank you for everything you've done for us.
I was just gonna go do my own thing, but then I ended up, there's something in me that just stopped, and I sat on the curb and I just started crying, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what? This is just, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm Amberlina Murray. I'm 33 years old, and I was raised in Port Coquitlam. So I was 9 years old when I started smoking weed, but it quickly, like between 9 and 10, probably 10 or 11 is when I started getting into ecstasy and cocaine and more of the harder drugs. I was fully addicted to crystal meth when I was, I would say 13 is when I was fully addicted to it. I was born with a very sick mother, so I was born addicted already. And then my whole childhood was full of abuse and anger and my mom being sick and having to watch over her, as well as she lived in the hospital pretty much in nursing homes because she couldn't care for herself.
What happened with Amber's mom and Amber is an absolute tragedy, and no child should have to go through that, and it breaks my heart.
So we didn't have like a good relationship at all. My dad, I was always daddy's little girl, but at the same time there was not much my dad could do because he was so focused on taking care of my mom, like he was her caretaker. I think he was at a point in his life where he just didn't know what to do. His life was so chaotic with this one woman that he didn't even know how to deal with his daughter who was addicted to drugs. As soon as I started smoking weed with friends at a youth center or started doing ecstasy, or the one thing that came to mind was I didn't have to feel anymore. Like those feelings were gone. Like I didn't feel pain, I didn't feel anything. And it was an amazing feeling. Finally, once in my life, I could turn to something that I didn't have to feel. It was when I had kids is when I realized I had a problem. I got clean at 15, 16. I stayed clean. I had the two older kids, Savannah and Caden. And then I split up from I left their dad. And all I knew was that little family. Like that meant the world to me. When we split up, I went right back into addiction and left the kids with my dad and their dad. And I didn't get clean until my youngest kid's dad came in the picture. And I only stayed clean because I got pregnant right away. I had no idea how to even get like a month or 2 months. 2 months was probably my longest. And then I just kept relapsing. I was definitely loaded there. And we went to the P&E and I couldn't even handle it for like 2 seconds. I was in the bathroom like the whole time. Like I was a shitty human being, like shitty. Like I was not a nice person unless I wanted something. That was the only time I was nice. And as soon as I got it, you wouldn't see me again. Like I just, totally opposite person than who I am off drugs. And that's just how it is when you want to get clean, it's like, you want to get clean, but your head's like so powerful in that moment when you start detoxing that it's like crippling. And so I talked myself into making a phone call. And when I asked to make a phone call, they said, if you make the phone call, you need to leave right now. And I still decided to make the phone call. And there was no pickup from my dealer. So they kicked me out anyway. The recovery house, a lot of them I got banned from continuing to come back and not staying clean. Not from anything bad I did, but because of not staying clean. Like some places are just like, like you're clearly not getting it, so maybe go to a different place.
She had nobody, and she was alone. And I remember everybody coming up to me and saying, hey, don't waste your time, you know what, she's just gonna end up doing this, or this. And I can understand where they were coming from, right? Because a lot of people had invested a lot into Amber, and Amber made unhealthy choices, but that's to be expected by somebody that is in addiction, right?
I have overdosed 4 times. The very first time I overdosed, it was actually my kids who found me in the living room, as I was still living with my youngest kid's dad at the time. And he ended up calling, they started screaming, and then he ended up calling an ambulance and stuff. And then I went code blue in the ambulance. I was able to make it through, thankfully, but yeah, that was probably like my lowest. There's something in me that just stopped, And I sat on the curb and I just started crying. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what? This is just, I don't want to do this anymore. I remember being in like recovery for like in a recovery house for like the 6th time, and I had a weekend, or not a weekend, but my youngest kid's dad brought them all to me to have like an hour visit. And I remember like that so clearly, that they were leaving, and this is after about 6 months and not seeing them at all because I was in addiction, and then the recovery house I was in, you can't see anyone for a month. So he came and brought them, and when they were leaving, all 3 of them were like screaming and crying and like would not let go of me at all. Where the staff at the house had to come out and pry them off me, and I like cried for days.
I just didn't want to let go, and I wanted to stay with her, and I just wanted her to come back home with us. I just felt really sad because I didn't understand why my mom couldn't come see us and why we always had to come see her.
It's heartbreaking. It's like, I'm doing this, by not putting the work into me. And continuing to use, I'm causing so much trauma in my kids that I grew up with. And I mean, they're floating around house to house like there's no stability at all. So, and no one's gonna love them the way that I love them.
Because of my chronic relapsing, to help me stay in the houses, of writing what the kids would say to me. I love you, Mommy, and I want you to stay there and get the help you need. So when you come home, we can laugh and have fun again together.
Like, addiction took everything from me, like my ability to be a mom, my ability to know how to even love on my kids. Like, I didn't know how to hug my kids anymore. Like, that natural mom instincts were gone. Like, I had to relearn all that through my recovery. It took me a long time to even talk about my mom, like before I got clean this time, but I knew if I wanted to stay clean this time, I had to talk about her. So like prior to this, like I just hated her. Like I thought she ruined my whole life. Because I knew like deep down that if I didn't have a mom like that, I probably would have had a better chance in life.
Yeah, myself and one other woman in this.
I did feel like the kids deserved to know why they went through what they did. And also deserve to know and also sharing my experience with them maybe help them for their future. And if my parents shared with me their experience, I would have known what a Narcotics Anonymous was. I would have known what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I would have known where to go to get help.
I think it's amazing that Amber is like super honest with them and super transparent. And but I also think that Amber does that because she wants to make sure that they understand that, you know, this is what happens and these are the consequences.
You're going out with Auntie Sunday morning.
What day am I? She understands what she put us through, and I feel like she tries to make up for it all the time. But like now, there's nothing really to make up for anymore.
So this is something I keep, and it's like all my medallions over the years.
From the broadcast center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Angelina Mintz here with your news and weather updates to 1 p.m. Healthcare has topped the list of complaints this year to BC's ombudsperson. In the annual report, it says almost 1,300 complaints were received on programs and services provided by the Ministry of Health. The complaints make up more than 15% of all complaints lodged within the year. The report says the Ministry of Health, ICBC, and the Ministry of Child and Family Development were the 3 most complained about public bodies. The BC Government Employees Union has ratified a new collective agreement that helps protect worker wages amidst inflation. According to the union, 53.4% of eligible members who cast their ballots voted to ratify the deal. This comes 2 weeks after strikes and 8 months of negotiating. The deal is set to cover about 30,000 people, including sheriffs, correctional officers, and unionized members of the liquor distribution branch. The deal also includes wage increases and cost of living adjustments and supports for employee health and safety and mental health in the workplace. iHit has released the name of a man who was shot and killed in the parking lot of a golf club yesterday morning near UBC. 38-year-old Visal Walia was shot just before 10 a.m. yesterday morning, and his murder is believed to be targeted and linked to the ongoing gang conflict. Investigators are looking to talk to anyone who was near University Golf Club yesterday morning between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. The Vancouver Humane Society released an advisory about issues with the sled dog industry and wildlife animals in capacity. Our reporter Carissa Chang has the story.
The organization is asking the public to sign a petition to update BC regulations about the two animal welfare issues. VHS campaign director Emily Pickett says now is the time for the community to raise concerns as MLAs are returning to Parliament.
Under the regulations, they are permitted to shoot surplus sled dogs, so dogs that they don't want anymore, so long as the operator has made reasonable efforts to try to rehome the sled dog. So of course we find that to be very problematic as well.
Pickett says the regulations around the sled dog industry has not been updated since 2012, and wildlife animals in captivity regulations date back to 2009. Carissa Cheng, 1680 The Crow.
October marks the month to recognize cyber awareness. Our reporter Chattis Leo explores how BCIT is educating students on how to protect themselves from ransomware.
According to American statistics, a business suffers from a ransomware attack every 7 seconds. It's stats like this that are making cyber attacks on businesses and people an ongoing threat to private information. Ilya Levotsky, a digital forensics instructor at BCIT, who's hosting a ransomware awareness workshop, says that we should all be concerned.
We should definitely be worried, and the topic of ransomware has been around 3, 4, 5 years. We should all be worried about it. I mean, obviously the higher threat and the higher danger is to companies and government organizations, but I see a lot of private people being infected by ransomware.
If you're wanting to learn how to protect you and your information, you can sign up for the online workshop on the BCIT website events page. Chattis Leo, 1680 The Crow.
Regional district officials on the Sunshine Coast are telling businesses and residents not to panic by the newly declared state of emergency. The order, which takes effect at midnight, is in place to limit the use of non-essential drinking water as BC continues to deal with the prolonged drought. Latin American Heritage Month kicked off this weekend with a ceremony on Granville Island. Our reporter Astrid Agbayani has the story.
The Ocean Artworks Gallery hosts the Altar de Muertos installation, where altars are decorated to celebrate the dearly departed. Paloma Morales, Latin Couvr's program manager, says Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is considered by some Latin American cultures as the most important event of the year.
If you are not from Latin America, or even if you are from Latin America but you don't know properly your culture, I think this is a good opportunity to come here. You know, with these kind of events, we realize the richness of our culture and our roots.
The exhibit is one of the many events around the city where guests can learn more about Latin America's culture and traditions. The celebration runs until the 2nd of November. Astrid Agbayani for 1680 The Crow.
Those were your news updates to 1 p.m. I'm Angelina Mintz, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.